And I'm going to go through briefly some information about the assessments. Just to remind you, we're in week 5. Today is Tuesday, the 22nd of August, and this is webinar 4. Assessment 1 is due Thursday, the 31st of August, and by 6 p.m., and you need to submit it via links on your unit Blackboard site. With that, make sure that you've produced a professionally drafted and presented report complying with the template with embedded standards. That SEB701 UXB301 template that's on Blackboard will be a big help if you haven't used it so far. You need to provide evidence that you've registered and received approval for your placements, your in-place approval emails. I would say if you have not yet registered your placement, please do it right away, but recognize that if you register it, say, tomorrow, it's going to be early to mid next week before that gets approved, even with all the documentation, because they're likely getting a rush of you all in advance of this assessment due date. If you don't get your in-place approval email before the assessment is due, it's fine. I'd say get it to us within that week. Just after the assessment's due, and that's completely fine, and the work log as well, but you absolutely have to, independent of whatever else you do, you have to submit your assessment on time. If you need to get a new copy of your in-place confirmation, you can just email the SEF Will team. You should be describing your will placement in your assessment, preferably working on just one placement rather than multiples, and using the one that's most relevant to your discipline. If you're going to report on a non-technical placement for the engineers, you need to contact your will coordinator. So that's INMA for electrical, Dariju for civil, and Ting for mechanical. You're going to be discussing and reflecting upon standards of professional practice in the workplace, as we talked about in the previous session in week 3. And you should be proposing learning objectives. And you may think, oh, I've already finished my placement, I'm not really sure how I would do this. What I would say is I'm comfortable with you saying, here are the objectives for my early career progression. And thinking about it that way. I think the other will coordinators would likely agree. You'll need to make sure that you've documented and reflected upon your day-to-day experiences from your placement in your work log. The work log that you submit by that 31st August deadline does not have to document all of your placement days, but we do want it to show evidence that you're making progress towards those. And again, you're doing 1-star L model, and we'd like you to make sure that event is clearly identified in your work log. If you have questions about that, again, get in touch with your will coordinator. Finally, keeping in mind the assessment structure, there is a full assessment brief and CRA on both the SEB701 and UXB301 unit websites, Blackboard sites. There are extensive resources. I had a student email me today to ask about organizational theory. There's a whole chapter from a book on organizational theory available in QT readings. What I found to be useful with that is to make sure that I already had my org chart before thinking about how the organization is put together, because that reading really gets at that. And finally, again, reminding you of the previous webinars, I have gotten a number of questions about the 4,000 word limit. It's important in professional practice to make sure that you write concisely and that you comply with standards on length. I would encourage you to, as much as possible, comply with that. I would say if you have 4,003 words, it's probably not an issue, but if you have 4,300, it's probably beginning to become one. Again, finally with that, you want to register your placement, and it should say A1 report rather than A2 report. If it makes you nervous thinking, oh my gosh, A2 by this week, that seems crazy. You need to make sure you've registered your placements, upload your approval emails in a single PDF file, go ahead and deal with your work logs, check to make sure that you have actually included all the things you need to in your assessment, and submit it. I would say personally that I would try and aim to submit it before 5 p.m. rather than 6 p.m. in case you have any issues. And if you have any questions about the assessment, please go ahead and type those in the chat. If you have questions about who to ask, keep in mind that the 4 WIL coordinators are online with you tonight, myself for urban development, INMA for electrical engineering, mechatronics, aerospace, computer and software systems, civil Dariju, and mechanical, medical, and process Ting. And if you have issues with in-place or with registering your placement, please get in touch with the SEF WIL team and make sure in your emails to any of those individuals that you include what your discipline is, because you may be emailing the wrong person, what your student ID number is, what your name is, and what your issue is in the subject of your email. That will make the response come quicker. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Donald Thistlethwaite.
Okay, so I'm Donna Thistlethwaite. I have been involved in a couple of the previous webinars. So I am a sessional lecturer here at QT and also an associate of the Careers and Employment team. I also run my own business as a career coach as well. Beautiful. So in terms of what I'm going to cover tonight, we're going to look at graduate capabilities, and a big part of that is going to be a video by Ruth Bridgestock. I'm going to talk about goal setting and spiderweb diagrams, which will form part of your assessment too. And finally, we'll have an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have about tonight's content or about the unit more generally. Okay, so a couple of months ago, Melanie and I were fortunate enough to be invited or have the opportunity to attend a lecture here at QT put on by the Institute of Futures Environment. So that was by Associate Professor Ruth Bridgestock, and it was called Future Capable, Learning for Life and Work in the 21st Century. We are going to watch a segment of that video in tonight's session, and I'd also like to just introduce a couple of or a few really good slides that capture the key points that I typically talk to my clients about in their career management. Okay, so, I actually wanted to cover off a few things there. So there's no doubt at all, I'm sure you're all very well aware, that the world of work and learning has changed so significantly in recent years. There's been massive digital disruption. The capability of technology has really changed work, the types of roles that people perform, and it's having massive impacts. We're seeing a much greater use of automation in businesses, and the introduction of artificial intelligence as well. This is very much the innovation economy. We are facing very different problems and challenges in the world, and innovation is the key to resolving lots of those and to the future of work. Massive globalization, as we know, it is becoming a much smaller world, and that presents lots of different challenges for the community. So what we're seeing more and more with learning and with how people perform their roles is the creation of communities of practice. And so a way to think about this is that these will be your sort of 6 to 12 people that are your close ties. It might be that they're colleagues, that they're friends, or even people that you hang out with. And Ruth found in her research with digital media professionals that there's been this massive decentralization, and people are learning more and more through their networks. And I know certainly in my professional work as a HR consultant, you would create these networks, and it might be people in your industry association, it'll be your colleagues, and for even me now, it's the members of my Chamber of Commerce, and even networking groups that I belong to. And it's about having these people that you can consult when when you are facing challenges, or you might need to involve them in particular pieces of work that you're involved in. And this is where this all the great work that you do with having various disciplinary projects here at uni can be really helpful, because later on down the track there are going to be times where you're going to deal with stakeholders, different stakeholders, bring people into projects that you've got when you need certain types of expertise. And they're not the only ones that we'll be learning from. These distributed networks are a key part of how we learn as well, and will continue to be so even more. And these are the types of people that you will have looser connection with, and you might be connected through social media. There'll be people that you're following, say, on Twitter, LinkedIn, and maybe even Facebook, and they will be a great source of filtered information. They will be curating information for you, and by following them, it will save you a whole lot of sort of time and energy to access the information that you will require for your professional practice. These networks are often underpinned by reciprocity. It's great that you can have these networks that then are supporting each other, and sometimes it can be as simple as sharing resources with these people, and that can create it can cement relationships, deepen relationships, and create a feeling of reciprocity where they will often go out of their way to help you as well. So we're going to have a look at Ruth's video in a second, and it is going to give you a lot of great background on the future capabilities required for graduates, and just some really excellent concepts that are helpful to know as you move forward in your careers.
Which actual capabilities do we need? I mean, is it okay to just renovate how we teach, or do we need special skills in order to be able to cope with the super wicked problems, manage the super wicked problems, and manage the fact that our jobs are going to be disappearing and reappearing, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves constantly? You know the answer to this already. Here's a big long list. Lots and lots of publications have been publishing these laundry lists of skills and capabilities for the 21st century, for the future workforce, and so on, for the last few years, probably since about 2010. This is my agglomeration of them, with a bit of an emphasis on the ones that I've particularly explored myself. Some of you are taking photos, and that's lovely. However, I'm going to encourage us to move away from this kind of approach, because I tell you what, we've got lists of skills and capabilities coming out of everywhere at this point. We've got disciplinary skills, we've got generic and transferable skills, we've got 21st century skills, we've got metacognitive skills. Oh my gosh, you know, it's overwhelming. And what's an individual to do, let alone what is a teacher to do? Instead, I'm going to give you some broad kinds of approaches and strategies that will engender those kinds of skills. And in so doing, I'm going to draw upon my study of outstandingly successful people, Australian people. They were creative industries professionals, so art, media and design, and also STEM professionals. These were all mid-career kinds of people. The big questions that I wanted, they were my usual sorts of questions to answer were, what are your reflections on higher education? What sort of skills and capabilities do you have? How did you learn those? And what else is distinctive about you, you outstandingly successful person, you? And so I followed these people for a year. They were very generous, and I was very annoying, because I kept on interviewing them. And I talked to all of their close colleagues, their friends. We did social network mapping. I had a look in their calendars. I attended meetings. There were 23 of them. It was a great year. I loved it. And I should say, these are their disciplines. These are the creative industries ones. So quite diverse. And here are the STEM ones. Outstandingly successful people. They were nationally and internationally recognised by their peers through prizes, through big grants, through patents, these sorts of things. It was different by each industry. That's the big finding. But before I go into that, I'm going to share with you very briefly some things that I haven't published on with respect to this, because there are lots of different capabilities that they have in common, and also some things that you can't learn. So for instance, if you want to be an outstandingly successful innovator, it helps if you are slightly taller than average, not too tall, yeah. Also if you are fairly good looking. I'm talking here about supermodel status, I'm talking, fairly good. And it also helps if you have a long-suffering partner who is prepared to support you during the early years while you're working through the vicissitudes of multiple failures and learning from failure, the instructive consequences of, oh, that hasn't worked, okay, rebound, try something else. So yeah, that's just a little segue for you. But as I said, here's the big finding. Here's the big finding. They have very interesting educational backgrounds, these people. It wasn't just a single discipline and lots and lots and lots of depth. It was transdisciplinary. They had backgrounds in very diverse areas. You can see here sort of visual communication and mathematics, theatre making and microbiology. So it wasn't necessarily a degree in each thing, but there was certainly a lot of informal learning, or some background learning, or a postgraduate qualification perhaps, in quite a disparate field. This was a key thing. So why is this a key thing? They had such disparate backgrounds. First of all, because it afforded them different perspectives than their unidisciplinary peers on disciplinary problems. They were able to bring a different perspective to the kinds of problems that were being faced. They were also able to brand themselves quite differently. So yes, I've got the skills. I have a unique perspective. And in an employment market that is as competitive as we know that it is at the moment, this is a key thing. The other thing was that it permitted them to link with people very dissimilar to themselves in order to come up with ideas and solutions to problems. Oh yeah, here's another study I found that will support my will support my findings. It's a correlational study, so it could be something else. But anyway, this study is great. It maps Nobel laureates' likelihood of engagement with artistic practice. So what it says, briefly, is that Nobel laureates are 2.8 times more likely than your average common or garden scientist in America to have an artistic hobby. So this could be taken as support for my argument around disciplinary agility. Or it could be something else entirely. We don't know. But anyway, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? It's an interesting thing. So yeah. You know about the T-shaped person, yeah? Popular management kind of idea. And it's been used to critique higher education for some time. So the argument is that, typically we'll turn out I-shaped graduates. So graduates who have depth in one particular disciplinary area, and that's it. Send them out the door. And the response has been to engender T-shapedness. What is T-shapedness? It's, yes, you've got the disciplinary depth to some extent, and then you've got a range of generic capabilities, transferable skills. So I'm talking here oral communication, written communication, numeracy, digital literacy, these kinds of things that allow you to adapt to different kinds of employment circumstances. And these generic skills or transferable skills support you to work in different kinds of areas beyond your I-shaped discipline. This has been the conventional argument. And there's certainly some support for this empirically. However, drawing upon my Creating Innovators study, I would actually argue for a different model that's more effective than this type of thing. I'm talking here about your T-shaped graduate. I'm talking about the graduate that has the disciplinary depth, and they may have some background in something else. They studied something in high school that they really loved. They're learning to code. They're doing a MOOC on something. They're also learning how to play guitar. They're dabbling in a space. And every different educational experience, every different discipline that you experience increases your ability to work with others outside your discipline, to tap into their knowledge regimes and to be able to translate what they care about and what's going on for them into meaningful practice. Yeah. So, if you are a great hobbyist and you've dabbled in lots of things, this is great news for you. For the rest of you, if you have that secret hankering to, take up guitar again, now's your time. Now's your time. Okay, and so this extends to the social networks of those people. When I have a look at the social networks of the outstandingly successful innovators in STEM and creative industries, their social networks are really, really interesting. Usually we hang out with people who are very similar to ourselves. It's called homophily. We tend to hang out with people with similar disciplinary background, similar political beliefs, and socioeconomic status, culture, all of that type of thing, because we don't like conflict. Human beings are really not good with conflict. However, these people went out of their way to engage with people who were completely outside their field and fields of experience. And digging into that, I learned that it was because they were intensely curious. They wanted to tap into what was going on in different disciplines, but what were the disciplinary challenges going on in aeronautical engineering at the time, and how can I tap into that? And also because we know now from lots of empirical studies, and these guys knew it intuitively, that when you have people who come from different disciplinary areas, different perspectives, they start working together in certain ways, new knowledge is formed. This is innovation in practice. So you have a group of people coming from different disciplines come together to solve a problem. Woo, there we go. New knowledge is formed. It's extraordinarily powerful. But homophily is still important. Why? Because once you have that great new idea and you're solving the problem, or that innovation, that new product or service is right there, then you need to take it back to a group of people who are going to bring this to fruition. They become a powerhouse of people who are going to bring it through to market, to an audience, and so on. The third bit is your weak and indirect eyes. I'm just going to pause there for a micro moment and go, hey, doesn't that look a lot like the preferred learning strategies of the digital media people in my previous example? Yeah. So weak ties are extraordinarily important here too. And why is that? It's because if you've got a project going on and you need a Perl programmer or you need an oboe player, you know somebody who knows somebody, or you know somebody online vaguely, and you can turn them into a strong tie and then start working with them in this multidisciplinary kind of way. So you see, weak ties are so extraordinarily important to us here in the 21st century. How am I going for time? All right, excellent. So now we've got a range of concrete examples of this, because I've been talking quite sort of up in the air and abstractly about things. And now I'm going to give you a couple of examples of of where this is actually happening or has happened. Has anybody played Folded? Yes, we have some Folded people in the audience. Usually everybody sits there. Okay, so Folded, it's a great online, massive multiplayer puzzle game. And its background is, it's all about protein folding, which is actually, you know, really quite a specialised kind of field in microbiology. And the reason that this is important is that in 2010, the University of Washington biochemists have been trying to solve a particular problem for about a decade. This particular problem was the structure of a protein that was integral to a monkey virus, the Mason infector, that was very, very similar to human HIV. If there are any microbiologists in the audience, I apologise for my really terrible science explanation here. I'm not a scientist. But anyway, we'll get through. So they've been churning through computing power. They've used up all of their computing power, all of the big machines at the University of Washington. We're trying to solve this problem. And they've had no success. Thankfully, just in the next building, they have the Centre for Games Development. And one of the guys in the, and I'm using non-gender specific here, guys, in the biochemist group knew the people in the gaming group. And they're also aware of the trend towards crowdsourcing. So they got together. They went, actually, we could crowdsource this solution, create this game, get hundreds of thousands of people working on this problem in a fun way, co-opetition, form teams, protein fold, find the most parsimonious solution. You know, it might only take a few months. It'd be great. So they did it. They put this online. You can still play it today. Fold it, and the game is about 10,000 of them solved this particular problem in 10 days. Yeah, and then they published it in Nature with all of the scientists and all of the gamers working together. So it's really, really, really exciting stuff. So it's a great example of transdisciplinarity, disciplinary agility, and the role of networks in what we do in solving problems. Here's another very brief example. You can check this one out online. Innocentive, which is actually a for-profit company in the United States. What they do is they crowdsource high-level scientific and technical solutions to things. So NASA use them all the time, and they run challenges. There are about 375,000 participants. Many of these people have PhDs, but many do not. And they come from a really wide variety of backgrounds. So I'll give you an example. Here's the NASA one about solar flares in 2015. So the issue that NASA had was that solar flares were happening unpredictably, and they weren't able to tell when they were going to happen, how intense they were going to happen, or when they were going to go away. And this is hugely a problem for astronauts, because radiation kills humans, and for their hardware, because radiation kills hardware. And they had no way of doing this. Of sorting this out. And so they put up a challenge on Innocentive, $30,000 to the best solution. Send it out there, see what happens. Here's the guy who won. He's not a physicist. He's not even a data analyst. He's a retired radio frequency engineer. And he had a great solution. Dramatically improved accuracy and time window of predictions, prediction capability of up to 8 hours with 85% accuracy. Legend for a retired radio frequency engineer from New Hampshire. Yeah, so there we go, there's another example. Crowdsourcing the solution. Oh, and there's this that they published as well. Having expertise unrelated to the problem improves chances of success. Well, I knew I was right. Okay, so take-home messages here. For everybody, for educators, for individuals, for organisations. Becoming more future capable. 1, find ways to make our shared challenges more real and immediate. So, yes, plastic bags are a problem, but they're not a problem over there somewhere else. They're actually a problem here, and they are affecting us. We're just not really aware of the links. So we need to make that very immediate. Foster hands-on, minds-on research, real-world learning, and problem solving. So that preferred way of learning that we do all the time anyway. But let's reinforce that. Let's really expand that. Become more key-shaped. Yes, do that MOOC. Take up that guitar again. It's going to be useful for something. And connect with others. So value your networks, grow your networks, learn together. Yeah. Build that LinkedIn profile. Try Twitter, maybe. And as a coder, if you're still worried, you're worried about the plastic bag situation. I am too. It's pretty dismal. There is hope. There is hope. And it's in the form of a 19-year-old aerospace engineering student. He's Dutch, Boyan Slat, who came up with an idea for a massive array that drifts around in the oceans and collects and filters plastics. He came up with this idea as an undergraduate student, and then he dropped out of aerospace engineering because, let's face it, it wasn't that relevant to what he was doing. And since then, he's crowdsourced millions of dollars. He's also crowdsourced a lot of expertise from engineers and from scientists. They have a prototype that is currently in the North Sea. And they're giving it a go. They're giving it a go, and absolutely right on. You can check out where they're going at theoceancleanup.com. So thank you very much for coming on and listening today.
Okay, so hoping you took some really great context for this disciplinary agility and the different shape of work that work's going to take moving forward, and indeed now. Ruth touched on the importance of the networks, and we're definitely going to talk about that. And I think a really important thing to be aware of is that as you move forward in your graduate career, you are going to be needing to continually learn. It's that commitment to lifelong learning and ongoing learning is critical, because it is your insurance policy for the future. It's a way to avoid unemployment, and additionally, you're moving into a world where you are going to be changing jobs a lot, and you're also going to be changing careers a lot. So that ability to reinvent yourself, to have these different interests that you can then reshape your career based on what the demands are of the economy and the way the world is changing. So Ruth hit on some really good points in there about being curious, about having networks where you can work transdisciplinary in a transdisciplinary manner with other professionals, and that Inno Centre and that need for innovation are very much the way things are heading. And so looking for ways that you can transfer ideas from different areas of interest in order to create innovation is a really valuable capability for the future. We'll talk a little bit about some career resources towards the end of tonight's session. The next thing that we're going to have a talk about is career goal setting. And there are some really good questions that you might have a think about as you move forward with your career planning. And the spider web diagrams, your star L's, they all link in with your career goal setting and your career planning, basically. So you might have a think about where you want to be in the next 12 months, the next year, or the next 5 years, and reflect on where you are now and what gaps exist, and how you're actually going to bridge the gaps that you have, and also look to expand your skills, and think about what time frames you will want to do that within. And this can be important thinking to do at this point in time, and then reflect on how your placement can support you in your career goal. So we are aware that you know, some of you will be mid-placement, some of you may have already completed your placement, but that sort of strategy around linking your placement into your career goal setting is really important. And so I'm going to talk about model to help you with your goal setting. Some of you, I'm sure, will have heard of SMART goals, and how they structured are the S is around being specific. So these are all of the key elements to a well-written goal, basically. So you want to be clear about what you're trying to achieve. You might think about who's involved, where, what. Ideally, you want your goal to be measurable. You want to know what you want to achieve, and in order to know, you want to be able to measure what you want to achieve in order to know that that's occurred. So how much, how many, can you quantify it? How will you know that you've been successful? Is it possible? So this is the attainable. Is it possible? Do you have all of the resources? Are you committed to this goal? Is it relevant? So how important is it to you? How does it align with your broader goals? And it needs to be timely or time bound. So what is the time frame for you to achieve your objective? We've got a couple of examples here. So by 26 October, submit 4 star L examples, which will communicate the skills developed during my WIL placement and which are subsequently assessed at credit or above. So that covers off each of those elements. We've got the date, it's specific, what you're going to be achieving. It is attainable and very relevant, obviously, to your studies. And we've got the quantification in terms of the assessment, the outcomes of your assessment. And another example might be between August and December 2017, you'll build your LinkedIn connections from 53 to 100, with at least 5 of those in the total coming from the WIL placement contacts that you make. So again, we've got all of the various elements there. It's very specific, and you can definitely tell whether that's been achieved or not. So we looked at spider web diagrams briefly in week 1. They do form part of your second assessment, and this little section we're going to talk about why we use them, how you select the skills that you're going to focus on, and generic versus technical skills. And we're going to talk about a little example or a case study as well. So spiderweb diagrams are a way of benchmarking where you're at. They're an opportunity to assess and then to track progress over time. So you can't improve what you don't measure. So it's important to get that assessment, and it's a really good visual that shows your progress over a period of time. In terms of selecting the skills, choose skills that you plan to focus on during your placement and that are relevant to your goals, and also obviously to your profession. Don't overestimate where your skill levels are, and you might discuss the difference between your skill levels before and after your placement within your assessment, and it would be good to discuss these skills with your placement supervisor in terms of working out ways that you're going to bridge those gaps during your placement. So we're going to talk about generic and technical skills. So you would have heard Ruth talk about those soft skills and, you know, the top of the T shape, and they're those things like your communication skills, ability to work independently, your ability to collaborate with others, which, as we've heard, is just such a critical skill moving forward, your creativity and your analytical thinking skills, problem solving, and even your reliability and though dependability. Those sort of soft skills are very important as well. In terms of the hard skills or your disciplinary skills, these are your technical skills that relate to your discipline. And there's some examples there in terms of your CAD estimation, conducting feasibility assessment. And, you know, the hard skills are often the ones that you can get some really valuable information from your industry associations, the professional standards around what they would be. So we want to have a talk about a little, a true story. Melanie met an Uber driver on her travels a few months ago, and this driver was somebody that came out of the oil and gas industry. He was an engineer, and he'd been out of his profession for about 14 months. So around 18 months ago, I was employed doing what we call outplacement work or career transition work with a company that contracted to organisations, but a lot of our clients were from the oil and gas sector. And at the time, there were hundreds of people that were like this Uber driver coming through with the downturn in the oil and gas sector. And we were helping these people to be redeployed into other sometimes other professions, but certainly a lot of different organisations, which sometimes meant leaving Brisbane as well. And so whether this gentleman is going to be successful making a transition back into his profession is really up to him. And the questions that I would ask are, has he been maintaining his professional networks? Has he remained connected with people that he used to work with his professional association, with friends that he went to university with? Has he remained connected? He could have been attending professional development, networking sessions that are offered by his professional institute and other similar bodies. And you know, he could be reading journals and industry magazines that relate to his field. He could be working with people who are still in the industry that could act like mentors to him, and those sort of people can be great for accessing intel on what's going on in the industry. And he could be also supplementing that with keeping an eye on what's going on through the media and other sources of information, probably the internet as well. And does he have good career management skills is something that can make a really big difference as well. So knowing how to write a really good resume, knowing about your STAR L examples so that you can use them to underpin your career management and your job search, knowing how to write a resume that's going to be really effective will absolutely make a difference to whether this gentleman can smoothly transition back into his previous occupation. There are many, many different soft skills that he will have been honing in his work as an Uber driver, and him being aware of these and being able to provide examples of how he has demonstrated them in his current role will also make a difference to his suitability as a candidate. So, you know, this is by no means an exhaustive list or a suggestion that every Uber driver has all of these skills, but there are many soft skills that apply. Obviously, he'll be generally using his communication skills. It certainly sounds like, talking to Melanie, that this gentleman was. You know, he could have great initiative, networking, customer focus, attention to detail with, you know, having to read maps and, you know, handle people's payment. He, you know, could be quite adaptable, goal-oriented. He's going to need to be pretty dependable because he's got to be obviously certain places at certain times and within certain times, have good judgment and also safety. So there we can see, even in the role of an Uber driver, there are a lot of transferable skills that can be used to confirm your suitability or to demonstrate suitability for other positions. So we've got a few spiderweb or a couple of spiderweb diagrams here, and we've got an example for the technical skills and the generic skills, and you will ideally have one of each. And so we can see there the pre and the post assessment. So before your will and at the conclusion of your will. There is apparently a video on Blackboard that talks you through the process of creating the spiderweb diagram, and Mel has also put up on Blackboard a Excel template that you can use and populate your skills, and it will generate your spiderweb diagram for you. So just a few valuable career resources as you're moving forward to your, I guess, post-uni, your graduate roles. And one is your StarL examples. These are just perfect for underpinning your job search and your career management. It's not that, you know, that the lecturing team like to just put you through these hoops for the fun of it. These are very valuable skills to develop because they will make a very big difference to your ability to secure work and demonstrate your capabilities as you move forward in your career, and developing good practices around this very early and then building on that as you progress in your career will make a very big difference to your outcomes. So we heard Ruth talk about your networks, and there is a great little activity that I would encourage you to do, which is called a network map. And many people think of their networks quite narrowly, and what you can do is a little diagram where you have yourself as a little circle in the middle, and then branching out from that, similar to a mind map, you have different branches based on the different streams of your network. So, you know, university could be one of those streams. It might be that your school mates would be another one. Perhaps you've got some sporting interests. Maybe you've got some community activities that you're involved in, and mapping out these different areas of your life, and then all of the different people that you're connected to in these different areas allows you to get a really great visual on the full extent of your network. And you know, if you know 100 people and they know 100 people, all of a sudden your network's more like 10,000 people, give and take a little bit of duplication. But this can be a great way to access knowledge, information, skill sets, but also jobs. It's absolutely one of the most effective ways to access future jobs as you move forward, and ones that will mean that you're not facing as much competition as advertised roles. the next thing that I wanted to talk about just is LinkedIn. Ruth touched on it, and LinkedIn is an extremely valuable resource for your career management. It's a great way to stay connected with your network. So please do connect with all of the people that you meet on your placement, and your uni mates, and people that you come across from any of the events that happen at uni, from industry. Connect with all of these people. You basically want to have the broadest network that you can on LinkedIn, because these people can be the source of a lot of opportunity down the track. And LinkedIn can be a great way to learn, as we touched on earlier, where you can follow influencers who will be filtering information to you that will save you a lot of time and allow you to keep up to date with what's going on in your field, or in particular interest areas that you have. LinkedIn can be great for career research as well. It's actually possible to search for an occupation on LinkedIn. So say it's a project management role. You would search for project manager, and you can actually choose to see people who have that job title. And what you can do then is look at their LinkedIn profile and gather some intelligence around the career paths that people take into that role, any additional education requirements or education that looks like it would be useful for that particular occupation. You can look at the types of groups people in this occupation are in, and if it's relevant, you might look to join those groups, because they can again be a really good source of industry information. I know when I was studying my graduate certificate in career development, our industry association has a LinkedIn group, and in that group, people would post about challenges that they were having and seek advice on different issues. And there was as much learning taking place in that group, and watching those discussions and being involved in those discussions as there were in my formal education. So, look for those sort of opportunities to access additional knowledge, and definitely contacts as well. If you then, were interested in pursuing a path in, say, this project management role that I was talking about, then you might also consider reaching out to people who are doing that role now, and asking if you could connect with them. And then once you're connected, you can actually speak with them directly and look to build a relationship with those people, and then also eventually look to have that network taken into offline and into reality as that is fit for you or suit your purposes. So meeting up with people to learn more about your profession or what's going on in the industry, and building those relationships can be very helpful to your future prospects. Make sure you have a LinkedIn profile. There are guides, a guide to writing a LinkedIn profile on the Careers Employment website, and it will step you through that process. And LinkedIn is also really valuable for job search, and it's in a number of ways. You can search for vacancies, and that's, I guess, one of its most obvious functions in terms of job search, but you can also access jobs through networks, and so again, that can be LinkedIn can assist that process. And then also you can follow companies that you're interested in working for, and some of those companies now post their opportunities on LinkedIn, and it's only if you're following them that you will have access to that opportunity. Ruth talked a little bit about, or she certainly mentioned the word MOOCs a couple of times during the segment of the presentation. So I'm conscious that not everybody knows what a MOOC is, although it's certainly the awareness is growing. So it stands for Massive Open Online Courses, and there are many, many different MOOC providers across the world, and they generally offer short online courses, generally 4 weeks, in a massive range of knowledge areas or subject areas, and they're free. They're completely free, and can be a great way to build some knowledge in a particular area, and you know, do what Ruth was talking about in terms of, you know, creating some of those elements of the key-shaped graduate, or certainly key-shaped professional. And it can be a great way to also assess your interest in a particular subject as well. So I think that actually covers off what we were going to speak about in tonight's lecture. And now I think it's over to you for questions.
If anyone has questions, please go ahead and post them. This is your sort of last big opportunity to get input from the various WIL coordinators on your assessments, especially to make sure that you get that in writing. So we've got about another 35 minutes to be able to go through with that. Does anyone have questions? I'll go ahead and type the answers, figures. Brendan's asked about figures, the org charts, and other places where figures and tables are specifically called for are the only places you need to have them. And Javon's asked, Donna, and you might be able to help with this one. Does their star L reflection, do we think their star L reflection has to specifically talk about one skill? Or could it be that your star L is actually talking about technical and generic skills?
Yeah, definitely technical and generic skills would be fine. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I'm thinking of situations where you might have needed to use a combination of things, or that it may be useful to demonstrate to an employer that while initially I thought that it really was just a technical problem, that it was actually a communication issue, and that then you were able to resolve issues with it. So I think that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, rarely is a skill, or I'd say never really is a skill used in isolation.
Yeah.
You know, even for a very technical experience or event, you'll be using lots of soft skills as well.
Because even thinking about a project that you might do entirely on your own, it may very well be that you have to go through and think about, how do I scope the project? How do I manage the timeframes of the project? How am I going to document the project so that someone else can see it afterwards? You know, there's a lot of different things that go into it. Does that answer your question, Javon? Or J. Van? I'm not sure which. Other questions? And we have Donna here tonight, and we've got in week 9 we have a resume workshop, and then in week 12 we have another workshop on interview skills. Yep, and Brendan, I can only recall that there's one figure for the org structure that's in the brief, but there is something that asks you to tabulate tabulate skills and goals, I believe. So I believe there's at least one reference to a table and one reference to a figure. Javon, I'm glad that makes sense. Yep, you don't. Yep. So the style guide in that sense is slightly outdated, and you found an error. We don't want you to include them in the report. We just want you to upload them online, because that lets us assess quickly whether or not you've got them. And actually, if you already have those documents, your work log in progress, even your final work log or your CTW and your in-place approval email, if you please would go ahead and email or upload those in Blackboard as soon as possible, then that allows us to go through. For UXB301, I'm going through about twice a week and indicating for the in-place approval emails and the work logs, if they're complete, I'm just saying complete, and if they are your CTWs indicating both complete and the number of days that you needed for your course that you've documented. I would imagine the other coordinators are probably just going to do about the same thing in this next 2 weeks. But we all would appreciate if you did upload those earlier rather than later, because it's a lot of documents to go through. Fantastic, Inma. So I don't think that you'd need references necessarily for your technical reflection, Javon, but what you would do is reference that organizational theory chapter about the type of organization you're working in, reference the professional practice standards for maybe the skills that you are identifying that you're interested in. For the workplace health and safety and other standards of professional practice, you're going to be referencing those. If you were writing a technical reflection and wanting to reference that you were, say, using a specific protocol, you might include that. But if you were doing it and submitting it in response to a selection criteria, as you might imagine, you wouldn't be including references at all. Part of the reason we've asked you to include references is so that if there's something that someone's not sure of, we can follow up on that, but also because it's good academic practice and it will help you in the long run to remember where you found information. Other questions? And this session is being recorded, and the chat is also being recorded and will be posted up. So if you don't have any questions and you want to go ahead and log off, you're welcome to. There won't be any new content. So Javon's asked if they've already done their placement, would there be no need in section 3.3 expectation versus reality to revise, reflect? I would say you might revise and reflect on those learning objectives, thinking about your early career progress, Javon, because but that's a very good point for us to consider in revisions to the assessment briefs for next year, is that we may want to put a clarification on if you've already completed your placement, that yeah, it's difficult to while you're not in midstream to revise your expectations for your placement. Does that help? Great. And again, if you don't have any questions, if you log off, because how we'll know that we don't have any questions is that you do. Good night, Ingrid. But where there's still 18 of you guys logged on, and granted that includes all of the WIL coordinators as well, we're going to assume if you're still logged on that you still have questions. Fantastic, thanks, Melanie. And not that I'm in any way trying to rush somebody off with not having questions, but I also know that you all may have other things you need to work on this evening. So we're at about 13 of you guys now. So I'm assuming that there are some of you who might still have questions. Javon, you've had some interesting ones. Peter, I think you were the first to log in. Brendan's had some interesting questions. I know Asmund pretty well. I don't know Balthazar or Ethan, but if either of you guys have questions, please go ahead and post those. Oh, great, Javon, no problem. There were a few questions in the logbook template. Are they mandatory? Yeah, I'd say that in that logbook template, they're probably good to fill out because you might need that information down the track when you're trying to describe your placement. But the evaluation of your, at least for urban development students, good night, Asmund, for the urban development students is looking to see have you actually described what you were doing at work on different days rather than just saying, mate, construction, repeat. So it's a really bad accent. So it's important to include those bits of information, but I know it does ask you some other things about, like, have you had conversations about workplace health and safety, and that is actually pretty important to make sure that you've kept track of, and could be something that you actually write about in your reflections on workplace health and safety standards in your report. Does that cover that, Siobhan? Yeah, they are open-ended. Yeah, and I think that how did the work placement assist you in your professional learning is probably one that should be more in-depth included in assessment 2. So it may be useful to jot down some notes on that to have that for assessment 2. But it is that for next year we're looking to do some revisions. It's hard though in the middle of a year because everybody's depending on forms and assessments to stay the same to modify that, but it sounds like you've got some good ideas on how we might modify it for next semester and next year. So thank you for that. All right, so Balthazar, Brendan, Evan, Siobhan, and Peter are still with us. Do you guys have any questions? Other questions? Fantastic, Javon. You have a great night. You're very welcome. And it's going to turn out your name's James rather than Javon. Or the J-V on. Great, Brendan. Oh, you started back at North Group. That's fantastic. I hope it goes really well. Good night. And Ethan and Peter, any questions from you guys? Perhaps Ethan and Peter have just left their computers on, so I'll see. Maybe they're at the movies. They just have this on quiet. So try and see with that. Because we're down to just the last 2 of you guys and just the coordinators. So if there are no questions from Ethan and Peter in the next 2 minutes or so, we might sign off. It is possible that they've just left their computers on, which is completely fine, but without any questions, it's Donna and I could sit here and have a conversation, but that's maybe not what we'd want. No, to the other will coordinators, I've been getting very few questions for clarification other than the ones around word length. And I posted some resources. All those links that I posted were on methods for editing. And I think in particular, this last one from Purdue was really pretty useful, and maybe a good one to shoot off to students that are having trouble. It goes through and says, you know, here's an unedited sentence, and then here's an edited sentence. And I find sometimes being able to look at how someone's just, you know, basically communicated the same idea twice can help with shaping how I think about editing things down. So Peter and Ethan, have you guys gone to bed or just left things on? I know Peter was keen because he was online at like 6:45. It's not State of Origin. There's no big game on. Other will coordinators, what do you think? Good night, Michelle. So I'm going to go ahead and call it a night because we don't have any more questions, and we have 2 students who I believe are still logged on, but they may not know that they are. And we don't want this video to drag on for too long, such that somebody's going to have to be watching or listening to something that's basically dead air. So with that, good night and good luck on assessment 1.